Lily Carter was 26 years old when she left Earth for the first time. She had always dreamed of seeing the stars, not as a soldier or an explorer, but as someone who could help others. She had studied medicine and languages at university, and when the opportunity came to work as a humanitarian aid worker on a distant world called Prime, she did not hesitate for even a single moment. Her father, Samuel Carter, drove her to the spaceport on a cold morning in November. He was a quiet man in his early 60s, with gray hair and hands that were still steady despite his age. He had been a soldier once, a long time ago, but he never talked about those days. Lily knew only that her father had served in some kind of special unit, and that he had retired before she was born. Now he lived alone on a small farm in Montana, growing vegetables and watching the stars at night. At the spaceport, Samuel hugged his daughter tightly. He told her to be careful. He told her to call him whenever she could. He told her that he was proud of her, prouder than he had ever been of anything in his entire life. Lily promised she would stay safe, and then she walked through the gates and boarded the ship that would take her to the other side of the galaxy. Prime was a world on the edge of Dominion Empire territory. The Dominion was one of the largest and most powerful empires in the known galaxy, controlling hundreds of star systems and billions of subjects. They were not kind rulers. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered, and they treated weaker species with contempt and cruelty. Humanity had only recently joined the Galactic Concord, a loose alliance of species that tried to maintain peace among the stars. To the Dominion, humans were nothing more than insects, barely worth noticing. Lily worked in a refugee camp on the outskirts of a city that had been destroyed by war. Thousands of aliens from a dozen different species lived there, people who had lost their homes and families to Dominion aggression. Lily helped distribute food and medicine. She learned to speak fragments of languages that human tongues were never meant to pronounce. She held the hands of dying mothers and sang lullabies to orphaned children who did not even understand her words, but understood her kindness. She was happy there, despite the hardship. She believed that what she was doing mattered, that every life she saved was a victory against the darkness of the universe. She wrote letters to her father every week, telling him about the people she had met and the things she had learned. She told him that the galaxy was not as scary as everyone said, that there was goodness everywhere if you looked hard enough to find it. Samuel read every letter carefully. He saved them in a box beside his bed. He worried about his daughter constantly, but he did not tell her to come home. He knew that Lily had found her purpose, and he would never take that away from her. Months passed. Lily became a familiar face in the refugee camp. The children called her by a name in their own language that meant something like the woman who smiles. The other aid workers respected her dedication and her endless patience. She worked long hours without complaint, and she never turned anyone away, no matter how tired she was. But far away, in the cold halls of Dominion command centers, decisions were being made that would change everything. The Dominion had grown tired of humanity's presence on their borders. They did not like the way humans spread across the galaxy, building colonies and making friends with species that the Dominion considered inferior. They especially did not like the humanitarian missions, which they saw as interference in their affairs. Commander was a high-ranking officer in the Dominion Third Fleet. He was tall and broad, with scales that gleamed like polished metal and eyes that showed no warmth or mercy. He had risen through the ranks by being more ruthless than his rivals, and he had never lost a battle or shown weakness to anyone. When his superiors told him to send a message to humanity, to remind them of their place in the galaxy, he accepted the mission without question. The attack came on a quiet evening. Lily was eating dinner with her colleagues in the main building of the refugee camp. They were laughing about something, sharing stories from their homes on Earth, when the first explosion shook the ground. Lily ran outside and saw Dominion soldiers marching through the camp, firing their weapons at anyone who moved. Ships hovered overhead, raining death upon the helpless refugees below. Lily did not run. She gathered as many children as she could find and brought them to a storage building at the edge of the camp. She told them to hide and stay quiet. Then she went back out into the chaos, trying to find more survivors, trying to do something, anything to help. She found a group of soldiers standing over a family of refugees. The soldiers were laughing. Lily stepped in front of them and raised her hands. She spoke in the Dominion language, using the few words she had learned. She begged them to stop. She told them that these were innocent people, that they had done nothing wrong, that killing them would serve no purpose. The soldiers looked at her with amusement. One of them said something that Lily did not understand, and the others laughed again. Then the leader raised his weapon and pointed it at her chest. Lily did not close her eyes. She stood tall and faced her death with the same courage she had shown in everything she did. Her last thought was of her father, sitting alone on his farm, watching the stars and waiting for her to come home. The soldier pulled the trigger. When the attack was over, there were no survivors. The Dominion soldiers burned the camp to the ground and flew away, leaving nothing but ashes and silence. Commander filed his report and received congratulations from his superiors. The message had been sent. Humanity would learn to fear the Dominion, or humanity would be destroyed. On Earth, in a small farmhouse in Montana, Samuel Carter was sleeping when his phone rang. He answered it and heard a voice he did not recognize, a young officer speaking words that did not make sense. There had been an incident, a refugee camp, no survivors. Lily Carter was among the dead. Samuel listened without speaking. When the officer finished, Samuel thanked him quietly and ended the call. He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, staring at nothing. The box of letters sat beside him, filled with his daughter's words, her hopes, her dreams, her love for a galaxy that had killed her for trying to make it better. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant in the Montana sky. Samuel looked up at them through his window, and for the first time in many years, he felt something stirring in his chest. It was not grief, though grief was there too. It was something older, something darker, something he had buried deep inside himself when he left the military and promised himself he would never kill again. His daughter was dead. The people who killed her were still alive, still laughing, still believing that they could murder innocent humans without consequence. They were wrong. Samuel Carter did not move from his kitchen table for 3 days. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He simply sat there, staring at the photographs of his daughter that covered the walls. Lily as a baby, taking her first steps. Lily at age 7, missing her front teeth and grinning at the camera. Lily graduating from university, wearing her cap and gown, looking so proud and so full of hope for the future. The future that had been stolen from her. On the 3rd night, Samuel finally stood up. His legs were stiff and his body ached, but his mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in 20 years. He walked out to his barn, past the tractors and the farming equipment, to a wall at the very back that looked like solid wood. He pressed his hand against a hidden panel, and the wall slid open to reveal a small room that had been sealed for 2 decades. Inside the room was a case. Samuel opened it slowly, almost reverently, and looked at what lay within. It was a rifle, but not like any rifle that most people would recognize. It was long and sleek and black, with a scope that could see targets from distances that should have been impossible. It had been built specifically for Samuel, modified and improved over years of service until it was less a weapon and more an extension of his own body. Samuel had been the best sniper in human history. Not the best in his unit, not the best in his country, but the best that had ever lived. He had killed dictators and warlords from miles away. He had ended wars with a single bullet. He had been given missions that were considered impossible, and he had completed every single one of them. His enemies had called him the Ghost because they never saw him coming and they never knew where the shot had come from until it was too late. But that was a long time ago. Samuel had retired when his wife became pregnant with Lily. He had promised her that he would leave that life behind, that he would be a father first and a soldier never again. When his wife died during childbirth, Samuel had kept that promise for Lily's sake. He raised her alone, taught her kindness and compassion, and made sure she never learned about the things he had done in his past. Now Lily was gone, and the promise no longer mattered. Samuel cleaned the rifle carefully, checking every part, making sure everything still worked perfectly. His hands moved with practiced ease, remembering movements they had made thousands of times before. When he was finished, he loaded the weapon and set it aside. Then he went to his computer and began to make calls. The first call was to a man named Danny Price. Danny had been Samuel's spotter during his military years, the one who watched his back and helped him find his targets. Danny was old now, living in a retirement community in Florida, but his voice was still sharp when he answered the phone. Samuel told him what had happened. Danny listened in silence. When Samuel finished, Danny asked only one question: "What do you need?" Samuel told him. Danny said he would be on a plane within the hour. The second call was to a woman named Carol Hayes. Carol had been the team's intelligence specialist, the one who found information that no one else could find. She lived in Seattle now, running a small bookstore, but she still had contacts throughout the galaxy. Samuel told her what had happened. Carol did not speak for a long moment. Then she said she would start gathering information immediately. The third call was to a man named Pete Dawson. Pete had been the team's pilot, the one who got them in and out of impossible situations. He ran a cargo shipping company now, with ships that traveled across the galaxy. Samuel told him what had happened. Pete said he could have a ship ready within a week. One by one, Samuel contacted his old team. Some of them he had not spoken to in 20 years. Some of them had families now, lives that had nothing to do with violence or death. But every single one of them answered his call. Every single one of them agreed to help. They did not do it because they wanted to kill. They did it because they remembered Lily. They remembered the little girl who had visited their training camps, who had made them laugh with her innocent questions, who had reminded them that there was still goodness in the world worth protecting. They remembered how proud Samuel had been of her, how much he loved her, how he had given up everything to raise her right. And they remembered who Samuel Carter really was. They remembered the ghost, the man who never missed, the soldier who had done things that governments still ever happened. If anyone could make the Dominion pay for what they had done, it was him. Within 2 weeks, the team was assembled. They met at a small station on the edge of human space, in a private room that Pete had arranged. They were old now, gray-haired and slow, but their eyes still held the same cold determination that had made them legends decades ago. Samuel stood before them and spoke quietly. He did not give speeches or make grand promises. He simply told them what he intended to do. He was going to find every person who was involved in the attack on the refugee camp. He was going to find Commander and everyone who had followed his orders. And he was going to kill them, one by one, until there was no one left. It was not about justice. Justice would not bring Lily back. It was about sending a message. Humanity was new to the galaxy, small and weak compared to empires like the Dominion. But humanity was not helpless. Humanity had people like Samuel Carter, people who would not forgive, people who would not forget, people who would cross the entire galaxy to avenge the ones they loved. The team began their work. Carol used her contacts to gather intelligence, finding names and locations and schedules. Danny analyzed the information, identifying targets and planning approaches. Pete arranged transportation, using his cargo routes to move people and equipment without attracting attention. And Samuel began to hunt. Word spread through the underworld of the galaxy. Something was happening. Someone was asking questions about the Prime Massacre. Someone was willing to pay any price for information about Commander and his soldiers. The Dominion heard the rumors, but they did not take them seriously. What could one human do against an empire? What threat could a single grieving father pose to a military that had conquered hundreds of worlds? They would learn the answer soon enough. Samuel sat alone in his quarters on Pete's ship, holding a photograph of Lily. She was smiling in the picture, wearing her aid worker uniform, looking so young and so full of life. Samuel looked at her face for a long time, memorizing every detail, burning her image into his mind. Then he put the photograph away and picked up his rifle. The hunt had begun. The first target was a junior officer named, a young Dominion soldier who had been part of the ground team during the massacre. Carol had found his name in leaked military records, and Danny had tracked his movements to a space station on the border of Dominion territory. Was stationed there now, guarding supply shipments and drinking in bars during his off hours, living his life as if he had not helped murder dozens of innocent people. Samuel arrived at the station 3 days before the planned assassination. He studied the layout, memorized the patrol schedules, identified every camera and sensor that might detect his presence. He moved like a shadow, unseen and unheard, just as he had done countless times during his military career. The skills had not faded with age. If anything, patience had made them stronger. On the night of the killing, Samuel positioned himself on a maintenance platform 2 kilometers away from the bar where spent his evenings. It was an impossible shot for most snipers. The distance was extreme, and there were atmospheric shields and moving obstacles between the platform and the target. But Samuel had made harder shots before. He waited for 3 hours, perfectly still, watching through his scope as laughed and drank with his friends. Then, when the moment was right, Samuel squeezed the trigger. The shot crossed 2 kilometers in less than a second. It passed through a gap in the atmospheric shields that existed for only a fraction of a moment. It traveled between moving cargo containers with millimeters to spare, and it struck directly in the center of his forehead, killing him instantly. No one saw where the shot came from. No one even heard it. By the time the other soldiers realized what had happened, Samuel was already gone, slipping away through maintenance tunnels and disappearing into the crowd of travelers on the station's main concourse. The Dominion investigated, of course. They reviewed security footage and interviewed witnesses and analyzed the trajectory of the bullet. But they found nothing useful. The shooter had been too far away, too careful, too skilled. The case was filed away as unsolved, and its death was attributed to unknown enemies. But Samuel was not finished, not even close. Over the following weeks, more Dominion personnel began to die. A logistics coordinator who had arranged transport for the soldiers, an intelligence analyst who had selected the refugee camp as a target, a communications officer who had relayed the orders from commander. One by one, they fell, each killed by a single perfect shot from a distance that should have been impossible. The Dominion began to notice the pattern. All of the victims had been involved in the prime operation. All of them had died the same way, from a single bullet fired from an unknown location. Someone was hunting them, picking them off with terrifying precision. Commander received reports of the killings with growing unease. He did not understand how this was possible. The targets had been scattered across Dominion space, on different stations and planets, some of them in heavily secured areas. How could a single assassin reach all of them? How could anyone make shots from such extreme distances? He ordered his intelligence officers to investigate. They found nothing except rumors and whispers. A ghost was stalking the Dominion, a human ghost seeking revenge for the massacre on Prime. Dismissed the idea as superstition. Humans were weak, primitive creatures who had barely mastered space travel. They could not possibly threaten a Dominion officer. But the killings continued, and began to feel something he had never felt before: fear. Samuel worked methodically, crossing names off his list one by one. He took no pleasure in the killing, but he took no guilt either. These were not innocent people. They had murdered his daughter and laughed about it. They had killed children and refugees who had done nothing wrong. They deserved what was coming to them. Between missions, Samuel thought about Lily. He remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle when she was 6 years old. He remembered watching her graduate from high school, trying not to cry in front of the other parents. He remembered the day she told him she wanted to help people on other worlds, and how proud he had been even though he was terrified of losing her. He had lost her anyway, not because she had been careless or foolish, but because cruel men had decided that her kindness was worth less than their desire to send a message. They had killed her for politics, for pride, for reasons that had nothing to do with who she was or what she had done. Samuel could not bring her back. No amount of killing would change that, but he could make sure that her death meant something. He could make sure that the galaxy understood what happened when you harmed a human's child. The Dominion sent hunters after him, elite soldiers and assassins, the best their military had to offer. They tracked his movements and set traps and waited for him to make a mistake. But Samuel did not make mistakes. He was too experienced, too careful, too patient. The hunters became the hunted, and one by one they joined the list of the dead. Danny and Carol worked tirelessly to support him, gathering intelligence and planning routes and staying one step ahead of Dominion counterintelligence. Pete flew his cargo ship through dangerous territories, smuggling Samuel in and out of secured zones. The old team worked together as smoothly as they had in their prime, proving that some skills never truly fade. Word of the killing spread beyond the Dominion. Other species in the galaxy heard about the human assassin who was systematically eliminating everyone involved in a massacre. Some admired him, others feared him, but everyone understood the message he was sending. Humanity would not be bullied. Humanity would not be intimidated. If you killed a human's family, that human would come for you, no matter how far you ran or how well you hid. There was no escape from human vengeance. Commander retreated to his flagship, the Dominion's Pride, a massive warship bristling with weapons and protected by the most advanced shields in the Empire. He surrounded himself with guards and sensors and security systems. He believed that no assassin could possibly reach him there. Samuel looked at the flagship through his scope from a hidden position on a nearby asteroid. He studied its defenses, analyzed its weaknesses, planned his approach. It would be the most difficult mission of his entire career. But he had never failed a mission before, and he was not going to start now. Had ordered the death of his daughter, had laughed when he received reports of the massacre, had believed that humans were insects, not worth considering as threats. Samuel was going to prove him wrong. The Dominion's Pride was the largest warship in the Third Fleet, a floating fortress that had never been breached by any enemy. It carried a crew of over 10,000 soldiers and was equipped with enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Commander had made it his personal sanctuary, believing that no assassin in the galaxy could possibly reach him within its armored walls. He was wrong. Samuel spent 3 weeks studying the flagship. He observed its patrol patterns from hidden positions on asteroids and debris fields. He intercepted communications and analyzed security protocols. He bribed a maintenance worker who serviced the ship's waste disposal systems, paying him enough credits to retire comfortably on any world he chose. He acquired detailed schematics from a disgruntled engineer who hated and was happy to help anyone who wanted to kill him. Slowly, carefully, a plan began to take shape. The Dominion's Pride had thousands of security measures designed to stop intruders, sensors that could detect any known weapon, scanners that could identify any life form, guards patrolling every corridor at all hours, automated defenses that could kill an entire boarding party in seconds. But every system had weaknesses, every defense had gaps, and Samuel Carter had spent his entire career finding those gaps and exploiting them. The night of the infiltration began with a distraction. Carol had arranged for false alarms to be triggered on the opposite side of the ship, drawing security teams away from the waste disposal section. Pete had positioned his cargo vessel nearby, ready to extract Samuel when the mission was complete. Danny monitored communications, alerting Samuel to any changes in patrol routes or security protocols. Samuel entered the flagship through a waste disposal port that should have been sealed, but had been left unlocked by the maintenance worker he had bribed. He crawled through narrow tunnels filled with foul-smelling garbage, moving slowly and silently toward the interior of the ship. He wore a special suit that masked his heat signature and blocked the sensors that were supposed to detect any organic life. The journey took 4 hours. Samuel moved through maintenance corridors and ventilation shafts, avoiding guards and cameras with practiced precision. Several times, patrols passed within meters of his hiding spots, but none of them detected him. He was a ghost, invisible and silent, just as he had always been. He reached private quarters just after midnight ship time. The commander's chambers were guarded by 12 elite soldiers, the best fighters in the Dominion military. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could tear through solid metal. They had been trained to fight in any situation and to never, ever let anyone harm their commander. Samuel did not use his rifle for this part of the mission. The quarters were too confined, and the guards were too close together. Instead, he used a different set of skills, ones he had learned during the darkest years of his military service. He moved through the guards like a wind through leaves. His hands struck with perfect precision, hitting vital points that disabled each soldier before they could raise an alarm. Some of them died instantly. Others fell unconscious, their bodies crumpling to the floor without a sound. In less than 30 seconds, all 12 guards were down, and Samuel stood before the door to his private chambers. The door was locked with a genetic scanner that was supposed to be impossible to bypass. Samuel had the access codes anyway, obtained from the same engineer who had provided the schematics. The door slid open, and Samuel stepped inside. Commander was sitting at his desk, reviewing reports on a holographic display. He looked up when the door opened, expecting to see one of his aides. Instead, he saw a human man standing in the doorway, holding a knife that dripped with the blood of his guards. Reached for his weapon, but Samuel was faster. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and knocked the weapon away before could even touch it. Then he grabbed the commander by his throat and slammed him against the wall. For the first time in his life, knew true fear. He looked into Samuel's eyes and saw nothing there except cold, absolute determination. This was not a man who had come to negotiate or to threaten. This was a man who had come to kill. Tried to speak, but Samuel's grip on his throat was too tight. He made choking sounds, his eyes bulging, his clawed hands scratching uselessly at Samuel's arm. Samuel loosened his grip just enough to let breathe. He wanted the commander to be able to speak. He wanted him to understand what was happening and why. Gasped for air and immediately began to beg. He offered Samuel money, more credits than any human had ever possessed. He offered him power, a position in the Dominion hierarchy. He offered him information, the names of everyone in the chain of command who had approved the massacre. He would testify against them, he said. He would expose everything if Samuel would just spare his life. Samuel listened to every word. Then when was finished, he began to speak. He told about Lily. He described her childhood, the games she used to play, the songs she used to sing. He talked about her dreams, her hopes, her belief that she could make the galaxy a better place through kindness and compassion. He described the way she laughed, the way she smiled, the way she looked at the world with wonder and love. He told about the letters she had sent him from Prime, about the children she had cared for, about the refugees she had helped. He described the last photograph she had sent, showing her standing with a group of alien children who were smiling for the first time in months. And then he told how she had died, how she had stood in front of soldiers with no weapon and no protection, trying to save children who were not even her own species, how she had begged for mercy in a language she had barely learned, how she had faced death with courage and dignity, even though she must have been terrified. Listened in silence. He had stopped trying to bargain. He knew now that nothing he could say would save him. The human's eyes were empty of everything except the memory of his daughter and the cold certainty of what he was about to do. Samuel finished speaking. He looked at for a long moment, memorizing the face of the man who had ordered his daughter's death. Then he completed his mission. When it was over, Samuel left the Dominion's pride the same way he had entered. He moved through the corridors filled with confused soldiers who had only just realized something was wrong. Alarms were sounding now, and guards were rushing toward the commander's quarters, but Samuel was already gone. Pete's ship was waiting exactly where it was supposed to be. Samuel climbed aboard and collapsed into a seat as the ship accelerated away from the flagship. Danny and Carol were there, watching him with concern, but they did not ask questions. They knew him well enough to understand that some missions left wounds that could not be seen. Samuel sat in silence for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph of Lily. He looked at her face, her smile, her eyes that had been so full of life. "It is done," he whispered. "It is finally done." But he knew that no amount of killing could fill the emptiness inside him. Lily was still gone, and she would never come back. He had avenged her death, but he had not healed his broken heart. He wondered if he ever would. The death of Commander sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy. The Dominion Empire had lost one of its highest-ranking officers, killed in his own quarters on his own flagship, surrounded by thousands of soldiers and the most advanced security systems in existence. It should have been impossible. It should have been unthinkable, but it had happened anyway. The Dominion demanded answers. They demanded justice. They sent angry messages to the Galactic Concord, threatening war if the assassin was not found and executed. They claimed that humanity had committed an act of aggression against their empire, that the killing of Commander was equivalent to a declaration of war. The Concord held emergency sessions to discuss the situation. Representatives from hundreds of species debated and argued and tried to find a diplomatic solution. Humanity's government issued public statements condemning the actions of Samuel Carter, calling him a rogue operator who did not represent Earth or its people. But privately, the reaction was very different. Human military leaders smiled when they heard the news. Human intelligence agencies made sure that certain classified files disappeared, files that might have helped the Dominion track down Samuel and his team. Human diplomats spoke words of apology in public meetings while doing absolutely nothing to actually help find the assassin. And across human space, ordinary people celebrated. They had been frightened of the galaxy, frightened of empires like the Dominion that could crush them without effort. But now they knew that humanity was not helpless. Now they knew that even the mightiest empire could be brought low by a single determined human with the right skills and the right motivation. Samuel returned to Montana and put his rifle back in its hidden compartment. He sealed the wall and returned to his quiet life on the farm, tending his vegetables and watching the stars at night. He did not give interviews or write memoirs or accept any recognition for what he had done. As far as the official records were concerned, the assassin had never been identified. Danny, Carol, and Pete returned to their own lives as well. They had done what they set out to do, and now it was time to rest. They stayed in touch with Samuel, calling him occasionally to check on how he was doing, but they knew better than to visit. Samuel needed time alone to grieve, and they respected that. The months passed, and the galaxy slowly returned to normal. The Dominion eventually stopped demanding justice, though they never forgot what had happened. Other empires took note of the incident and quietly revised their assessments of humanity. Perhaps these newcomers were not as weak as they appeared. Perhaps it was not wise to provoke them unnecessarily. The massacres stopped, not because of treaties or diplomacy, but because military commanders throughout the galaxy had learned a simple lesson. If you killed human civilians, especially the family of the wrong human, you might find yourself being hunted by a ghost who never missed and never forgave. It was not worth the risk. On the first anniversary of Lily's death, Samuel traveled to Earth to visit the memorial that had been built for the victims of the Prime Massacre. It was a simple wall of white stone, with names carved into its surface in neat rows. Lily's name was there, along with all the other aid workers who had died trying to help people they had never met. Samuel stood before the wall for hours, not speaking, not moving, just looking at his daughter's name. Other people came and went, leaving flowers and crying and saying prayers in a dozen different languages. Samuel did not cry. He had no tears left. He had spent them all in the dark months after Lily's death, when he had planned his revenge and prepared himself for what he was about to do. An old woman approached him as the sun began to set. She looked at him with kind eyes and asked if he had lost someone in the massacre. Samuel nodded but did not speak. The woman said that her grandson had been one of the aid workers, a young man who had wanted to be a doctor and had volunteered to help on Prime because he believed it was the right thing to do. She told Samuel that she was proud of her grandson, even though his death had broken her heart. She said that he had died doing what he loved, trying to make the galaxy a better place. She hoped that his sacrifice had not been in vain. Samuel looked at the old woman for a long moment. Then he spoke for the first time in hours. He told her that her grandson's death had not been in vain. He told her that the people responsible had been punished, every single one of them. He told her that the galaxy had learned a lesson about what happened when you harmed innocent humans. The old woman looked at Samuel with a strange expression on her face. She seemed to understand something that he had not said out loud. She reached out and touched his hand gently, and she thanked him without explaining what she was thanking him for. Then she walked away, and Samuel was alone again with his daughter's name. He stayed until the stars came out, the same stars he had watched from his farm in Montana, the same stars that Lily had loved so much. He thought about everything that had happened, everything he had done, everything he had lost. He thought about the future and wondered what it would hold for humanity among the stars. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of empires and wars and cruelty beyond imagination. Humanity was small and new and still learning how to survive in this vast and terrifying universe. But they were not weak. They had proven that on Prime and in the corridors of the Dominion's pride. They had shown the galaxy that humans would fight for their own, that they would never surrender, that they would pursue justice to the ends of the universe if necessary. Samuel touched his daughter's name on the memorial wall one last time. He whispered goodbye to her, promising that he would see her again someday in whatever came after this life. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the memorial behind. He returned to Montana and resumed his quiet life. He grew older, his hair turning white and his body growing slower, but his hands never lost their steadiness. Sometimes, late at night, he would take out his rifle and clean it, just to make sure it was still in working order. He hoped he would never need to use it again. But if someone harmed another human child, if someone made the same mistake that Commander had made, Samuel would be ready. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Samuel hoped that someday they would learn to respect humanity instead. He hoped that the lesson of Prime would lead to peace rather than more violence, that other species would realize that kindness and cooperation were better than cruelty and domination. Lily had believed that. She had believed it with all her heart, right up until the moment she died, and Samuel believed it too in his own way. He believed that the galaxy could be a better place, that sentient beings could learn to live together in peace, that the darkness could be pushed back by the light. But he also believed that sometimes the light needed to be protected by those willing to do dark things. Sometimes kindness needed to be defended by violence. Sometimes the only way to stop evil was to become something that evil feared. Samuel Carter had become that something. He had become the ghost, the legend, the nightmare that haunted the dreams of every tyrant and murderer in the galaxy. He had sent a message that would echo through the stars for generations. Do not harm humanity. Do not threaten our children. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. Because somewhere out there, watching and waiting, there is a father with a rifle. And he never misses.